All right. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Wanted to get everything exactly squared away in the right spot, streams off and rolling, screen sharing working the exact right way, and now we are. Um, I'm Colin O'Keefe. I'm excited to have you join us today. I'm checking in, as I mentioned earlier, from Seattle, Washington, the beautiful Ballard neighborhood of Seattle, Washington. It's up north of the Ship Canal in downtown. It's a bit of a gray, cloudy day, but that's not unexpected for fall in the Pacific Northwest. So who's talking here anyway? Who's this guy fumbling around trying to get the live stream working and getting everything squared away? What's he doing? I'm Colin O'Keefe. For those who don't know, I see some familiar names on the participant list. So no number of you probably do know who I am, but if you don't, again, Colin O'Keefe. I'm director of product here at LexBlog. Bluntly, I'm happy to help with whatever you need. So if you're like, hey, when should I reach out to Colin? What are the types of things that he might be able to help with? Can be anything. You can always start with me. If you're like, hey, we would like to put together a session for our practice area group on starting a blog, this exact presentation, or it could be on engaging with folks on social, or it could be, hey, can you talk to our marketing team about preparing social collateral for sharing posts? Always happy to do that. Also, you can check out prior webinar recordings. We have those online that hit on some of those subjects. But if you are curious, like, hey, I'd love to have you chat with the rest of our group, I'd love to have you do that, don't hesitate to reach out. My email's right here, colin@lexblog.com. And the same goes for, hey, need a little extra attention on something that we're working on, or hey, I've got a product idea for you, or a little bit of feedback I'd love to share with regards to the platform. Happy to help on that type of stuff. That's what I and we are here for. Make sure we got a Q&A here. Not seeing your screen. It's black. Thank you, Audrey. Let's make sure that this is working right. Was 11:10, so that's holding. Let's try one more time. Stop share. Share screen. Hey, and it looks like we've got a text. Somebody said they're seeing screen just fine. If anybody wants to weigh in, if they're not seeing it still, let me know in the Q&A. Fellow LexBlog folks, ping me if you need to or anything like that. But holler if you're seeing issues, but should be good to go now. If not, please, yeah, do let me know so we can get that going. Like I said, I'm Colin, director of product here at LexBlog. On the personal side, I love pinball, e-bikes, Packers, baseball, stuff like that. So if you want to talk blogging, or if you want to talk Major League Baseball owners not spending enough money, I'm always here to talk about that type of thing. But let's dive into what we're going to talk about today on where to start when starting a blog. Everybody has a little bit of a different process. Everybody has a little bit of a different motive for what they're doing when they start a blog. So we'll try to hit on the different perspectives that might be there. You might be a marketing person that's leading a new group blog. You might be an individual lawyer who it might be an individual who's starting their own individual blog versus a group blog. So everybody's in kind of a different place, and we will try to hit all of those kind of different perspectives and at least lend credence to those. Also, at the same time, this is a familiar group. This isn't the most like on rails presentation or anything. It's not the most serious thing in the world. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to drop those into the chat or raise your hand. Or if you want to share perspective, request to even talk if you'd like to. But don't hesitate to weigh in with any questions or clarifications or anything like that, whether that's a point of disagreement or just double checking to see what I mean on certain things. Happy to help with that. But as far as the agenda, we'll start with setting a top level strategy, some of the biggest things to address first, because you want to get it right before you get off and rolling, before you get too far down the path. Because honestly, I mean, there's some stuff where, if you start off on the wrong foot, if you start with too general a subject or something that's too broad and it's not the right idea, I mean, you could pour hundreds of hours into this project and not see the success you want because you started off on the wrong foot. We'll get into kind of the important tactical first steps, kind of the nitty gritty details, a few things on social and on search and what to be mindful of. We'll talk about spreading the word on it. How do we get the word out once we get started? And then also some common mistakes that'll be kind of littered throughout, some of the things that I've seen that work and don't work well. But let's dive into it. Let's take a look at we'll start with the top level strategy. We'll get into some basic tactics and then get into the first steps for when you're ready to roll and you're off and rolling. You're actually writing and putting content out there. Um, so yeah, we're starting with a top level strategy. What's the first thing we want to do? If you've been on any of my webinars in the past, you've seen me use this line and refer to the word publication. This is the number one goal for running a law blog. Well, at least that's the number one goal, is to bring in work. That's why attorneys, lawyers, law firms start these publications. It can be to network, but ultimately you want to have the end goal in mind to bring in work. But how do you do that? What do you have to accomplish? What do all the best business development publications, the best networking publications, what do they do? What is the core commonality between all of those? Very frequently, it's first and foremost, they're running a quality publication. It is a good resource. It is a consistent resource. It's something that an audience can go back to time and time and time again, because they know this is a spot where I can get good information, readable information, actionable information. It is a helpful publication. So if you look at that first and foremost, I know I say this on every webinar, but it is so vital, because sometimes people get caught in the kind of the gray area, the nitty gritty. They're like, oh, should I write exactly this? Are my headlines looking like that? What do you think of the links here? Are the colors there quite right? Getting way too deep into it. What you're looking for first and foremost, running a helpful quality publication. So remember that you want to be a resource when you look at the publications that you read on a regular basis, whether that's for your professional life, whether that's an author whose books you particularly enjoy, or it could be a sports blog or community that you frequently go back to. You're going to a place that is a quality publication, and that's what you're trying to run. Honestly, it's just an authentic media outlet, but it's one you network off of and bring in work through. So what does that mean? Let's start with choosing a subject. This is one of the most important, probably the most important first step, the most important first step to really do right, and that is choosing the subject that you choose. Honestly, the narrower, the better. It is exceedingly rare, if not completely unheard of, that someone will come to us at LexBlog and say, hey, I'm thinking about starting a publication on this subject. And we go, I think that's too narrow. I think you're going for too focused an audience. Almost never happens. Whereas the other way happens almost all the time. The vast majority of blogs that we have people want to start are too broad. And it happens for a number of reasons that we'll get into, but let's focus on um, uh, where you want to start. What are the good things you do versus where the missteps happen? So a lawyer should look at, or a practice group or a firm should look at, where can you dominate? Where can you or our group be the number one resource on blank? What can we do what is an area of the law, an industry, a corner of an individual practice area that you feel, hey, we can run a great publication on this, and we know we can dominate that space. There's a lot of challenges that come into that I'll hit here in a second, but that's the first and foremost. One of the things our CEO, Kevin O'Keefe, says often on his strategy consultations that we do is, hey, if you were to wave a magic wand and you were to say, all right, 5 years from now, I'll be doing exactly the type of work that I want to do. It's the fulfilling work that I love doing. It's the type of work that brings in money. If you were to wave a magic wand, what would it look like? Aim that high. You want to be the person who's known for blank, the person who's the number one source on X. That's how high you should aim, and that's why you should choose to aim things really narrow. It's going to be exceedingly difficult to be the number one firm blog on employment law, or the number one resource on privacy law, or the number one resource on securities law. That doesn't mean that you can't chase that down. It just means that you're kind of limiting the ceiling. You're lowering the ceiling for where you might end up. The pushback that we often hear on that, which is understandable. I mean, I've been through this before, trying to decide whether to start a new publication, not start a new publication. Um, it's honestly how I'm close to having like 3 or 4 blogs at this point, because there's so many different aspects of my own life that I love writing on, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to have them all in one place, but I like hitting all of them. Um, but when you start a blog on a niche practice area, it doesn't have to be, the niche itself doesn't have to be all you practice on. So if you are focused on a really narrow area and you want to touch on something that's ancillary to that or parallel to that or something that intersects with that area of law, you could always do that. Also at the same time, it doesn't have to be all you practice on either. Just because you're known as the, e-bike lawyer or the lithium lawyer, that doesn't mean that you don't also practice in other areas at the same time. I've mentioned this publication a whole bunch of times, but like one of the blogs that gets the most traffic on our network, not that traffic is the be all and end all by any stretch of the imagination, but goes to show you the level of appeal that a niche publication has. Probably the most trafficked blog on our platform is Cruise Law News by Jim Walker out of Miami. It's exclusively devoted to the cruise industry. It's not devoted purely to like, okay, criminal allegations or personal injury lawsuits that arise as a result of like foodborne illness and things of that nature. It's not exclusively devoted to the environmental aspect of it with regards to cruise ships polluting different harbors and stuff like that. It hits all of it. He says, I'm covering the industry. I'm serving as a watchdog on the industry, a very narrow, very specific industry, especially, now going back, this is something that started probably 15 years ago, but he started very narrow. And because of that, he owns that space and has done very, very well. Bill Marler in food safety is another one. He is the country's food safety lawyer, and he's owned that space because he jumped on it from the beginning and just dominated that space. It very frequently happens where when choosing a blog subject, we'll have marketing groups come to us and say, all right, well, we just got this started this practice group, and therefore we should have a blog that is the exact same subject as the practice group. Okay, we have this practice group. We should have a blog for them. They say they want a blog, so we're going to give them a blog. The title of the blog is going to be the same subject that they cover. And I get the thought process, but you do have to consider one, it's a competitive space. Is this a space you can dominate, or are you just kind of going through the motions just to get a blog out there because they said they wanted one, but it's kind of a catch-all. People always worry, oh, what are we do all these different services, so therefore the blog's got to cover all these different sections of the practice area. Therefore, we're just gonna do that. We're gonna get it done. We're gonna get it out there. It's gonna be on the same template as our other stuff. That's fine. That looks great. Let's just keep it moving, get it out there. And then 8 months later, it was kind of a jump ball that nobody went up for because it was so broad. There wasn't a specific leader. But yeah, it's one of those things where you cannot get narrow enough. So how do we go about doing that? If you have one subject idea, if you have one area, you're like, hey, I want to do employment law. Can we cross that with another practice area or geographic region? This is a really simple way to look at it, but it is something that I've seen work well. Okay, you're a large national firm and you want to do employment law. I get it. That's a lot of firms do it. The vast majority of large law firms that we work with do it. Sometimes you just have to have that presence. But honestly, you're going to be better off in the long run as far as the success of that publication and its ability to bring in work if you cross it with another subject. So what do I mean by that? Okay, you want to do employment law. Let's say you want to do employment law. Cross it with a geographical area. Let's focus on, for a large law firm, you could still do California employment law. That's still relatively broad, but you could also do, so let's say you theoretically wanted to slice a little bit more. We're going to do California healthcare employment law. We are going to do California technology employment law blog. There's so many things that if you start slicing it down, that doesn't mean that a firm, this large multinational firm with a lot of offices in California, is only going to work in, for example, technology company employment issues. No. But if you have a publication that's geared towards a specific audience, and it's an audience that you either one, do a lot of work for, or two, want to do a lot more work for, it's going to see value. So yeah, if you were like, hey, this is the Silicon Valley employment law blog, this is the Bay Area tech employment law blog, and it addresses issues that are specifically unique to technology companies or California companies or California technology companies, you can see there's going to be a lot more value there than if you just go, oh, well, I mean, we're just going to start our employment blog practice area. We're just going to just let that go and keep it going. Well, I will say one of the things that's most daunting with starting a new blog is that when you do, it feels indefinite. Like it feels like such a big thing. I don't know if I've used this analogy before, but it's like if you were in a relationship with somebody and it had crossed, say, 2 months, and now you're like, all right, well, now we have to have a either an anguishing breakup at some point in the future, or we're gonna have to get married. It's one of the two. Uh, with the blog, you're like, well, am I gonna do this till I die? What are we, it feels so heavy. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be the be all and end all. You can start a blog. We can get you up and rolling quickly. If you decide that you want to pursue something else later, you decide, okay, we tried to be really aggressive in this narrow area and didn't quite work. You can always switch it up. Don't feel like it's this big undertaking because it shouldn't have to be. Um, Also, instead of choosing based on practice area, consider looking at it from a completely different angle, like an industry. So instead of saying, hey, we are going to cover privacy law, we are going to instead address all areas of law as it pertains to, for example, the automotive industry. Foley and Lardner for a long time has had a great blog called Dashboard Insights, and they specifically address all legal issues, supply chain, employment, technology, IP, with regards to the industry. So consider that, like how the audience looks at things versus how a firm looks at things. And you want to be mindful for how the people that you serve think and consume information. A GC, of course, may keep their eyes specifically on individual areas of law, but a lot of business key stakeholders, a lot of executives are more so going to follow, okay, this is a publication that's devoted to my industry. It's going to cover all different types of stuff with regards to my industry. That's going to be big. That's going to keep people hooked in. And it may seem like it has a smaller potential because it's a narrower subject, but you're more likely to capture more and more of that audience. Um, Similarly, what are the lawyers passionate about, or a lawyer? You want to chase that. Don't underrate the single lawyer who is very passionate about a crazy niche subject and just wants to try something. They can. It doesn't mean they have to get, for example, the full setup on your firm branded blog. Say you just want to try them out with something. We've got a Stoddard platform that's great for the individual lawyer who just wants something that looks solid, it's easy to use, and it's simple. You can always let them try that. But yeah, what are the lawyers passionate about? Because if you don't have that passion from the start, it's very hard to succeed. But at the end of the day, you want to chase the idea that you are going to be the person who wrote the book on blank. What is attainable? What sounds great? What sounds like something that would be extremely valuable to your business? Going back, it's like, hey, are you going to be the person who wrote the book on employment law? Probably not. Are you going to be the person who wrote the book now still on California employment law? It's still going to be a really competitive space. Are you going to be the person that wrote the book on employment law issues that Silicon Valley tech companies run into? Maybe. That seems much more plausible. Are you going to be the type of, are you going to be the person that wrote the book on employment issues for government contractors in the technology space? Hey, you could be. The more you slice it down, the more likely you are to be the person who wrote the book on blank. So for example, one of the things I wanted to make sure that we were hitting on this webinar was even ideas that I would recommend to others, where my mind goes when thinking about possible new blog subjects. I always love to see people start something that's really new, that's aggressive, that you kind of get the sense that you're like, of course, there's a blog in this area. And honestly, sometimes firms will start diving into blog subjects, and I look at it as like a consumer of going, oh, this must be a big deal. This must be an issue. Like, so for example, I saw for a bit PFAS we were getting a lot of requests to start a PFAS blog. It was one of those things where I was like, oh, okay, I think PFAS stuff is becoming a bigger and bigger deal. But yeah, here's some subjects that I would look at as you get rolling. Sorry that we're bouncing back and forth here. But here are some things that I think if you were to start a blog in one of these practice areas, you could stand to do pretty well. Psychedelics, that is a burgeoning space, especially as it overlaps into um, the medicinal space. I think out in Massachusetts, coming up in 2 weeks, there's a ballot measure that would either decriminalize or legalize psychedelics in Massachusetts. You're seeing more and more states kind of take a look at this. You're seeing more and more healthcare institutions, academic institutions start to take a look and studying psychedelics and their impact on healthcare. It's one of those areas where it's weird to be one of the first people or one of the first few, but man, we saw large law firms jump on the cannabis industry bit in a huge way over the last probably 3 to 5 years, but they were still lagging behind some of the early players on that space and thus didn't quite nail it, or at least didn't garner the level of attention that an early adopter had. This is next one, unionization. Unionization efforts are up enormous across the country. I think all of our employment management side attorneys and law firms are very much well aware for it. It's a touchy subject, I think, probably for management side blog to specifically hit on because it's going to sound like you are really pushing against that, and that's a tough story. But man, I say this all the time, but there are not enough blogs on the plaintiff side, on the labor side, to hit on these subjects. Unionization would be a big one. I think I Googled unionization law blog to see if there was anything out there specifically devoted to the laws around unionizing, union voting, and specifically around that term. You don't see a lot that's specifically on that. You see a lot of employment blogs come up, the management side blogs come up, but not this. Self-driving cars are going to be everywhere. I know the folks in San Francisco, Waymo is taking off in a significant way. You're, of course, getting the Teslas and everything like that. It's going to continue to be a huge subject. Lab-grown food, we're starting to see like states push back against that. Obviously, it's getting to be a bigger deal. It's a very controversial subject, but similarly, it's one of those areas where you can cover an industry or an item versus a specific area of law. And those specific people who operate around those industries or items or strategies, you're going to be an invaluable resource for those people. Carbon capture, facial recognition, election, microplastics. That is one of the most buzzy words of 2024, microplastics. And maybe there's some overlap with PFAS and forever chemicals and stuff of that ilk, but whether you're on the plaintiff's class action type side or you're on the defense side, you're looking to get into the regulations and stuff like that. Microplastics law monitor. If somebody started that blog and authored a post a week or 2 posts a week, you would be the microplastics lawyer in 18 months, like unquestionably. And it is a huge area that people are talking about all of the time. I think we all at this point have microplastics coursing through our blood. So if it's going to be talked about more and more, not less. So yeah, that's a subject that I would jump on for sure. And the same also goes for AI or general AI, artificial intelligence, large language models. A lot of firms, we're seeing more firms start their AI law blog. That's good. You can definitely do that. We're trying to help a lot of firms succeed in that space. But something to definitely consider if you're considering yourself an AI law blog is similar to like what we were talking about with employment, slicing it with another subject. Can you slice AI with another subject? AI and intellectual property. That's going to be huge. That's like almost a whole course, college level course that could exist as far as, okay, what is fair use? What's not fair use? What about repurposing and licensing? AI and IP, enormous crossover. Same for AI and healthcare. AI and media is close to IP too, but AI and finance, AI and employment, that's a space where we're seeing a lot of posts on AI used in the hiring process. AI and tech. You could have AI and real estate. I don't have on here, but for example, in Seattle, There is a real estate listing slash management company that was using AI to set rental rates based on what they were seeing around the market and based on their other users. Well, that's um, antitrust or anti-competitive to a certain extent. So there's a lot of weird legal issues that need to be sorted out. And if you dive in with, I'm going to talk about all of AI because I love AI. That's fine. You have your AI practice group and they want to make sure they talk about everything. That's fine. But if you're thinking, we want to be the group that wrote the book on blank, we want to be the group that wrote the book on this, we want to get all of, we know that if we do AI, our vast majority of clients are coming from this sector. Just dive specifically into that sector. I know it seems daunting because it's narrow. You think I'm not going to have enough stuff to write on, but what if I want to hit on other stuff? You can always do that, but just know by aiming small, you're more likely to see these bigger results. How do you title your law blog? This comes up all of the time. Um, and honestly is one of the parts of the process that slows down people the most because one, it feels like a big decision. It's what's the sign going on your building, it's the title of your book. It feels like a big deal and it is a big deal, but you don't want to overthink it to the extent that it's dragging the process down for several months. So I often tell folks to play it down the middle, which doesn't mean you can't be glib. Like you can't, like that isn't to say don't come up with a clever glib title, something that's a single word or cutesy or whatever. You can do that, but like there's really nothing wrong with playing it down the middle, which is just to say this is the blank law blank, and we're gonna hit on some examples here in a second. Um, but yeah, remember it will appear elsewhere. So if you're, hey, as Art Vandal, so like if you're planning on getting, ideally you're getting cited in your local business journal or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, does it make sense? Does it seem possible that it would happen when they say, okay, according to Art Vandelay, author of the blank law blank, or is it, some goofy glib title? Maybe the goofy glib title is better for branding. You throw your weight behind it and you love it. Yeah, I think we had an autocorrect mistake here, but domain matters, but isn't everything. So a lot of times people be like, oh, I like this title, but the domain isn't exactly the same. It's a bit of a deal, but it isn't something I'd let dissuade you from choosing a particular title because a lot of times people only have to punch that domain in first one time. They have it bookmarked or they have it auto completed and stuff like that. That doesn't mean to choose something like really bad or like one letter difference from an existing publication with the same name, but it's just a consideration. But still, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I'm saying play it down the middle, just say what it is and play that. So what do we do on that front? Real, oh, sorry, got a slide mixed up here in the middle. So let's see. So you're titling your law blog. Here is how I do it, which is basically just I Google newspaper sample names. I've grabbed some of them here. And then we know it's going to be law. It's going to be the blank law blank. So the second blank I know is going to be pulled usually from a list of words, a list of sample publication names. Touch that, I keep flicking that off. Sample publication names. So we have sample publication names. These are not all of them, but it's a good selection. Okay, so how do you choose one? Simple adage that will get you very far in the world of writing and titling. Everyone loves alliteration. They love alliteration. Repetition of a consonant sound. They love it. They love it. So AI law advisor, got the A there. AI law leader. Let's see. We have the microplastics law monitor. We have, and then you can always use the microplastics law ledger. Let's go back here. What do we got? Psychedelics. So that would be S. Self-driving cars, S. So psychedelics law source. Um, self-driving cars law source. News works for so many. So it's like, all right, we got an N over here. Maybe not we got election, but you could do election law news. It just doesn't have to be significantly more complicated than that. You don't have to come up with some incredible creative title that everyone just absolutely loves. It's so clever. Sometimes people think that, and then when they see it elsewhere, you see it cited, it's going to show up on LinkedIn and stuff like that as a publication name. Just there's nothing wrong. There's nothing at all wrong with being, the e-bike law inquirer. It sounds like a publication. It is a publication. It has that feel to it, and people are more likely to trust it than they are if it's something that's glib and it's the official blog of the blank practice group. It'll be a little different. So also one of the top level things that I wanted to hit on before getting into some of the basics is you need a champion lawyer. This is one of the most important things in starting a new law blog, if not the most important thing. Marketing led blogs can struggle. It sounds like if it can feel like assigning homework to the lawyers. If you're like, hey, we have this practice group and I want to start this blog for the practice group. If you don't have a champion lawyer on the team, it is so hard to see to be successful because nothing touches passion for a subject. It is so important on a team law blog to have that individual champion lawyer. And that isn't to say just that they're just like a champion. Hey, they're the one person that's for this. The blogs, especially the large law group blogs that I've seen succeed, bring in work, and boost a firm's reputation on a big time practice area, they will have a lead lawyer on the blog serve as editor, and it isn't just a title. This is the person that is pushing lawyers to contribute, that's reviewing posts, that's ideating on what should go up there. They're taking it very, very seriously. And I've seen big time lawyers take this on. Some people who have shaped the law in this country. Ballard Spahr. I always think of the leader of that group. I'm missing him up between. I believe it's Alan Kaplinski. I always confuse him and the CFPB director because we have this great story on that. But no, it's Alan Kaplinski. Big in the class action waiver space. I think he might even be like the inventor of class action waivers. But he was the editor and he was the editor of the CFPB Law Monitor, and now it's the Consumer Finance Law Monitor. He would get on people, pushes people, and as a result, Ballard Spahr, their blog is the #1 resource on the CFPB because they took it seriously. I mentioned this earlier. Don't underestimate the solo blogger. If you do have an individual lawyer who's really passionate about a subject and they want to try something and get something going out there, and you're thinking, oh, let's see if we can jam a couple more lawyers into this, or let's see if they can just contribute over here. I get it. I get why you're there. You don't want people to, see a shiny red balloon, try it, and then abandon it. We have base level publications that we can start people out on that we can help with, make it really low commitment and get them off and rolling and have it be their own space. And then if you decide, hey, this is something that's working, we can always upgrade it and move it on to something that looks a little bit more like the rest of the firm blogs. But if it's just their individual project, yeah, it'll have the logo on, it'll look nice. We'll make sure we have you covered. But man, a lot of the best law blogs that exist now and have ever existed are from individual lawyers because it is their personal column. It is their space that they can control. And then as a result, they write in a fashion that is very personable, that is very engaging and connecting to folks. But the main thing is you got to have a champion lawyer. This can't be just a marketing led effort. You got to have the lawyer who's big on it. But yeah, let's dive into some of the beginner basics that we have here. SEO considerations. So first and foremost, there's a couple. I have these bullets down at the bottom here, which are probably the bigger points, which is that you're not going to outsmart Google. There's not going to be some trick that you do that's just right and it's the right combination of things that you're going to shoot to the top, regardless of what the content is that you have out there. Also, at the same time, search is mattering less now. I don't know about you, but usually when I'm searching for information, I'm not searching necessarily for information. I'm searching for the place that's going to have that information. And I almost have to start filtering in advance. So I was recently traveling over in Italy. So it'd be like, hey, what's if I'm trying to find beaches in Sorrento, I might go beach, Sorrento, Reddit, or you could theoretically go TripAdvisor. I want to get to real people. Because yeah, search is mattering less and less these days. Also, I think for the vast majority of the lawyers that we work with, you're not necessarily getting work because somebody looked up, hey, I need a a Silicon Valley employment lawyer. I mean, they're dealing with very sophisticated matters. And oftentimes, the way that they come about you via search is by searching an individual subject. So, what are the things that you should, though, keep in mind? You want to control what you can control. One of the biggest things that you control are your title tags. These are the titles that are on the top of every individual page. The way to see it most likely is just if like you hover over the tab and it pulls up the full text. That's what your title tag is. So your blog title, for example, is in the title tag of every single post. The post title is often in the title tag as well. So keep that in mind when, for example, titling your blog. If you title it some glib title that doesn't contain the keywords that you're going to discuss, okay, well, you're making a little bit of a sacrifice there. So yeah, remember your page titles, your blog title, and then the other thing that you can control to a certain extent. But remember that you do have, so you can control the biggest things for search, at least as far as the most controllable ones are, again, that titling structure, making sure that your pages are titled appropriately and having the terms that you want to have. You don't want to like stuff it full of stuff. You just want it to accurately describe what's on the page or what's on the publication. But the other big thing that really impacts search engine results are inbound links. So make sure that you're getting the ones that you can control. So for example, when the blog starts up, make sure that it's linked on the firm website, on the right practice area pages, on the attorney bio pages. Are there other directories it can potentially appear in? We make sure all Lexblog blogs are on lexblog.com. They generate links that are going out all the time. But keep in mind, that's one of the big ones. And we'll hit on some strategy around that here in a second, too. Promotional pages. We talked about the blog title as something that can hold up a project and get people slow to start. Promo pages are another. What are promo pages? Those are like the about, services, and contact pages that exist on your blog. Sometimes people or sometimes firms will just kick users over to the firm website. I personally think it's kind of nice to keep people on the publication, like on the about page, it's describing what the publication is about, and then also what the authors are into, their bios and stuff of that ilk. We also include services on there. So, hey, here are the services that this lawyer or firm provides as pertains to the blog subject. For example, if you have a narrow subject on the blog, you would want to, on the services page, list out how you work with those types of companies. And you may also say, oh, I also do this type of work as well. But yeah, those are the ones that we've traditionally done. Something that I've even taken a closer and closer look at is contact pages. That isn't to say that it isn't something we've made a direct decision on, but it's something I'm thinking more and more about, which is the necessity of it or potentially lack thereof. There's contact information usually all over a blog. You obviously want to make that very, 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 very clear. But contact forms are also like the number one way that malicious actors are going to mess up your site. By far, the number one way. Web forms, they're just going to keep hammering stuff at that. So any page with a form, you usually have to make sure is protected to a certain extent, and it's something you always have to keep an eye on. So it's something that, hey, we're kind of looking at it. But yeah, don't overthink it. Don't let it hold you back. Don't let this be something that bogs you down for a long period of time. And also, this is another space where you want to write to the medium. This is a blog, so be personable on the about page, be personable on the services page. Write with language that you would use to, describe your publication or yourself when introducing yourself at a dinner party. It's not, stuffy and academic unless that's what you're going for. What about social? What do we do with social when we're getting going with a new blog? Minimally, make sure that the existing and active accounts that you have are linked to from your blog. Get your open graph settings dialed. So make sure that when a post is shared, like on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, that the card that pops up, that looks right. The shape of these is kind of always changing. LinkedIn's one that we're taking a look at. They're kind of making them a lot smaller than they used to. So we'll see what we do there. Looking at creating some shareable graphics that are paired with that. But make sure that those are set, that when you go to share your blog, the homepage URL and the post URLs, when you share those, that the text that's showing up The image that's showing up, image or images that are showing up are what you want. You just want to be intentional with that. You want to make sure that you're setting what are called your open graph settings. Those are the universal social settings, the things that tell, hey, Facebook, this is the image you should show. Hey, this is the title you should show, and that type of stuff. Here's the domain, of course, as well. You don't need some massive, crazy social strategy when you first get going. I think a lot of times people want to think really big, which is good. You want to have that ambition, but you don't have to be like, oh, are we going to start a podcast? Are we going to have a TikTok at the same time? Should we do this? Should we do that? It's a lot to deal with when you're first getting started. So on social, I would start small. In the legal space, LinkedIn is a great default. Make sure your author sharing their posts on LinkedIn. They're sharing the posts with their colleagues on LinkedIn. Twitter, I think, is a really good one. Twitter is not a traffic driver. It's not something that you should expect for great distribution. It's not something that you're going to immediately see like broad reach on. But Twitter tends to be kind of the type of space where there are other influencers. It's where other writers exist. It's where reporters often operate. So if you can break into your practice area's community on that page, you can be in really good shape. Email, still out there, still an enormous part of the communication medium, and it's still very, very big. Utilize the lists that you have. This is kind of a gray area because people are like, oh, can we take this list and just send the blog post to all of these people? It can be a really iffy gray area because you want to make sure that when you're sending people digital media, when you're sending people emails, you want them to be emails that they signed up for. Otherwise, you're kind of breaking their trust. It's just legally really gray as well. And remember to have a personal touch. Like it can, if you are generating a mass email, you can still be something that's like, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up. We're starting this new publication. If you want to subscribe here, that would be great. Or stuff along those lines. Or if you want to use existing lists to alert people to this new publication, that's really good. You can alert parallel groups that are, so that's like another one where it's, hey, if you're covering a specific industry, you may think, oh, this is really narrow. Well, you can promote an industry blog to people that are from all different practice areas. So if you're like, hey, I know you're following our IP publication, but you also operate in the automotive space, be sure to subscribe to our new automotive blog. You can pull in different people from different audiences, but have that personal touch. And this is a spot where kind of the gray area of like reach, exposure, and distribution can become much more real. Keep an eye on who joins up. Those are big wins. Those are really interesting when you can say, oh, this GC signed up, or though this reporter signed up. And you can see on the back of Lex blog, you can get an idea for who's signing up, how it's growing, because honestly, everybody wants to see, oh, this line goes up. That's the most important thing. Line go up. Well, sometimes one subscriber, the right subscriber, can be worth hundreds that are not the right subscriber. So keep an eye on who's joining up, and that can be a really good, really kind of intimate interplay that builds up that type of stuff. Promoting your blog elsewhere, a big thing. Don't overdo it. I would say if you make this big grand deal of something and you try to blow a bunch of smoke, it can backfire sometimes unless you're really ready to hit the ground running. So don't feel like, hey, we got a press release, we got this, we got that. We're saying it's going to be revolutionary. It's going to be the #1 resource on the web for blank. It's a tough claim to make at the very start. So be mindful of pushing it too hard and just jumping into the fray and yelling nonstop. So promote it in the spirit of the publication. Is it a major endeavor that your team or firm's full weight will be behind, and for sure that'll be the case? Okay, then, build it up a little bit more, get it out where it needs to be. Or is it a personal project you want to build up intimately over time? Okay, then you might slow play it a little bit more. You definitely want to hit the low-hanging fruit. I mentioned utilizing the existing email list is one. Also, get it in, like if you're running an individual solo blog, get it in your email signature, get it in the appropriate attorney bios. The attorney bios I mentioned are some of the inbound links that you can control to boost that SEO. But make sure to get it out where it needs to be and handle that low-hanging fruit, but don't overdo it. You can share it on LinkedIn, you can share it on social and other places, but you don't have to make it some big, grandiose, giant thing if you're not ready for it to be a big, grandiose, giant thing. So say now it's go time. Just here in the last few minutes, I want to hit some of the top level strategy things. If you have questions, fire away. I'm going to hit a couple more things here as we wind down the hour, but here are things to keep in mind. This is a classic. This is something we've said for as long as we've taught publishing and networking on the web, which is before talking, listen. The analogy that we've used for years is that it's like a cocktail party. If you walk into a cocktail party and you're like, hey, everybody, look at me. I've got something to say. I've got this. I've got that. It's going to be great. Hey, I think this. I think this. I think that. I think this. You're going to look insane and you're just going to get tuned out. But probably you're more likely to get hauled out of there. But before talking, listen. So as you get going, consider who are the sources that you plan to lean on? Who are the people that you plan to follow? And these can be from your existing consumption habits. So if you're decided to start a really niche blog, it's probably because you're really interested in that area of expertise, of practice, at least it should be. And if you're really interested in that area, that subject, that industry, you probably already are reading content that comes out of that space. So make note of the sources that you plan to lean on and draw inspiration from, and the ones that you're thinking, hey, I've mentioned this before, but going with a clear picture of, I want this person to know that we exist. I want this blog to know that we exist. It would be really cool if I were cited by them or shared by them. That would be great. And then similarly, as you get rolling, as you start coming up with post ideas, think what sample posts can we come up with based on those existing sources. So as you go through the launch process and you're still in your everyday life consuming content around Silicon Valley employment law or the automotive industry, think, oh yeah, I did see this report that said this. That made me think about, yeah, okay, that could be a post, or oh, that could be a post. But yeah, this is where to start when you do actually start. I mentioned this is getting in the weeds, but it's kind of another way of looking at engagement. I mentioned before that inbound links are a big thing for SEO. And this is also why you shouldn't chase SEO, because usually it comes as a reflection of other efforts. But inbound links are a big one. You're not going to have somebody just link to your content because you wrote it and it was amazing. It's challenging. People are more likely to link to your content if you actually engage with them. So you're saying, hey, this automotive blog had a really interesting perspective on X, Y, and Z. I'm going to add to it by adding this perspective. I'm going to drop a note to them to let them know, hey, I read your post. I thought it was so good. I just wanted to add on a couple things from a legal standpoint. It's more likely that they will link to you going forward. Then you'll get those inbound links. Honestly, that's not what you're chasing. That's more like an allegory for why you don't chase SEO, because really it's just something that comes as a byproduct of doing things right in the first place. But it's something to keep in mind. Connecting with people is the goal. Building relationships and networking is the goal. Lawyers have always gotten their best work the same way, which is through their network, through their reputation, through the word of mouth. So focus on building those individual connections and thinking, hey, who do I want to know that I exist? Who do I want to know that this blog exists? And then working to make that happen in a deliberate way by engaging with folks, as opposed to, hey, I'm just going to constantly spew stuff from my own head nonstop and not really engage with what's going on out there. This is a big one, starting with the right kind of goals. Obviously, I mentioned before, the number one goal is to bring in work. But that's kind of this horizon that you're off on, but still, the things that lead to bringing in work, new relationships, connecting with the right type of people, being known as the lawyer who wrote the book on blank. But ultimately, you want to control what you can control. One of the big things that you can control in the early going is output. You can control how many posts you're publishing per month. You can control how consistent you are. You can control the subject matter that you're covering. You can control whether or not you're writing posts with an intent to network and engage, or if you're not. But control what you can control. And the most important thing is controlling that output and being consistent. Celebrate the small wins. If you get a great new individual email subscriber and it's a GC at a firm that's big for you, that's a win. If you get linked to from a trade publication elsewhere, that's a win. So celebrate those early wins. You're not just looking to be, oh, our traffic is up X% over last month, which was up X% over the month prior. It's just a tough thing to chase. So find the wins that you're more likely to control and influence, and the wins that honestly are more likely to lead to the number one goal, which is bringing in work. This is the most important. I talked about this. You want to be consistent from the jump. This is really where it matters. Find a habit, a routine that works. So we have some lawyers on our network that when they're watching Sunday football, that's when they write. Maybe they like doing it on Monday evenings, or they get up in the morning, they get their jog in, they read the paper, they author a quick post. Find a habit, a routine that works. I think the old adage is that like takes 3 weeks to form a habit, and then it takes 90 days to form a lifestyle. I was looking up the, I guess, veracity of that. I don't know how exactly perfect it is, but all I'll say is a few weeks adds up really fast. If you author a post or 2 posts a week for 3 weeks, all of a sudden you'll be like, this is a thing I can do. This is just part of what I do. Engaging first is going to make writing easier. If you're writing stuff purely from your own head constantly versus citing what you're seeing out there, it is way, way, way more difficult. If you're saying, hey, here's this interesting thing I saw, here's why it's interesting, here's what you need to know about it, those posts are so much easier. So yeah, lean on those easier post ideas too, especially as you get going, especially as you're just trying to prove the concept to yourself and to your colleagues, to your practice group, or what have you. So lean on stuff like, hey, we've got a year recap and a preview. This time of year, you got 2 posts that any blog can hit. Here are the biggest stories of 2024 in blank law. Here are our biggest predictions for 2025 in blank law. Also, frequently asked questions. Hey, here's a question I'm constantly getting from the people that I work with. That's a post. Same an interview post. You can do an email interview with a GC that you know. That is a great way to spread the word on your blog also, as well as to say, hey, starting this blog, I wanted to know if, would you answer a few questions on this, that, or the other? And then as, maybe they do, and you can fire them back. That's a quick, easy post, a quick email Q&A. And then 1, you've got content, and 2, they're probably going to go look and see how the post looks on your blog and probably subscribe afterwards as well. And you can also, even as a, if it's not going to be for content, you can always reach out to your list, say, hey, you mind offering, you have any feedback on what we're covering on this blog? You have any perspective? Do you have any things you'd like to see covered on the blog? The more you position it as a resource for people, the more likely they are to take to it. So we're only 90 seconds over, but any questions folks have, whether you have any now, that's fine. I can see people are kind of unwinding, but also if you do have questions and you want to, talk person to person, you want to hop on a phone call or drop me a note, you always can. Colin@lexblog.com. I'm happy to help. I'm happy to talk through things. Happy to do a presentation like this or another one for your firm or your group. But yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always here to help. Thanks, folks, for spending the time. I don't know how it always goes by so fast, but yeah, that's our webinar. Keep an eye out for the future ones. The recording is going to be up very soon. You can actually see it on LinkedIn or Facebook right now. But yeah, otherwise, thanks for taking the time. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always here. We're happy to help. Thank you.